At the edge of the Ottoman Empire, in a cold, forgotten village, a young girl was ripped from her home. She was beaten, chained, and sold, like cattle. They called her Alexandra. But history would remember her by another name, Hurrem Sultan. She arrived at the imperial palace as nothing, just another concubine, expected to obey, to be silent, to disappear. But within just a few years, she would bring the most powerful empire on earth to its knees. The Sultan, the most feared man alive, would abandon centuries of tradition for her. Mothers would weep, princes would fall, and entire bloodlines would vanish. What did she do? How did a former slave girl outwit generals, manipulate ministers, and rise above queens? This is not a love story. It's a power play, twisted, ruthless, and brilliant. And once you understand the moves she made, you'll never see Hurrem the same way again. Tonight, we enter the shadows of the harem and uncover the political genius that changed an empire. She was no ordinary captive. When Alexandra Lasowska was dragged in chains to the heart of the Ottoman Empire, she wasn't just entering a palace. She was entering a battlefield. But unlike the open bloodshed of the empire's wars, this battlefield was quiet and merciless. The weapons were not swords. They were secrets, seduction, and silence. The Topkapi Palace had one rule for women: obey or vanish. The harem held hundreds of women, trained from childhood to be flawless, submissive, forgettable. Most were discarded after a night. But Hurrem? She watched. She waited. She learned the hierarchy, the rituals, the rivalries. She learned how to walk, how to smile, how to never blink in front of her enemies. But most importantly, she learned him. Sultan Suleiman, the ruler of the world, the shadow of God on earth. While others worshipped him from afar, Hurrem studied him like a chessboard. She noticed something others didn't. Suleiman wasn't just a conqueror. He was a man haunted by legacy. He wanted more than love. He wanted a partner, someone who could match him move for move, someone who could understand the empire that invented with him. And that's exactly what she became. Unlike other concubines who begged for affection, Hurrem made herself invaluable. She told jokes no one else dared tell. She debated poetry, war, religion. She challenged him. And Suleiman, used to blind obedience, found himself intrigued, then obsessed. But this wasn't just chemistry. This was strategy. Hurrem knew that attention alone wasn't power. In the Ottoman court, everything could be taken from you overnight. So she did something unthinkable. She broke the sacred rule of the harem. She refused to be shared. Traditionally, the Sultan never married. No concubine was allowed to have too much influence. But Hurrem refused to be just another name on a scroll. She demanded monogamy. And then she demanded marriage. Everyone expected her to be killed for it. Instead, Suleiman gave her everything. He freed her, then made her his legal wife. The first time a sultan had done that in over 300 years. Overnight, she wasn't just Hurrem. She was Hurrem Sultan. The court went silent. The harem turned cold. And Mahdiva, the mother of Suleiman's firstborn, watched her dreams burn. Hurrem had done the impossible. She didn't rise through charm or chance. She rose by reading the room better than anyone else, and moving before anyone saw the threat coming. But the palace wasn't finished with her yet, because when a woman breaks tradition, others don't just whisper, not with armies, but with ambition. The Ottoman harem had a hidden proud mother of Sultan Love is dangerous. Firstborn son, sultan might Mustafa, be charmed, entertained, had the bloodline, even obsessed, but tradition that could cloud his judgment. Hurrem, that could shift power. Now mother exactly what Hurrem intended to do, including the one she became his wife. Day where the Sultan's she wasn't crown. Just a figure of affection. It wasn't about who the Sultan loved. She was a fixture of state. Not anymore. She didn't live. It was about who would survive. She lived in the Ottoman Empire, near the Sultan. Only one woman's son could inherit the throne, any advisor, and for that to happen, even his own mother. The others had to fall. She was always there. The palace, whispering when decisions were made. Music. Watching behind those velvet curtains, listening to which generals hesitated, dark ones, and slowly, Mahdiva and Suleiman stopped making decisions alone. Not at first. This terrified the court. With poison. Mahdiva, not in goblets, who once bore Suleiman, his first son, fed directly into the ears of the only man who mattered. The allied Sultan, Suleiman, the queen mother, and he listened, saw her influence slipping away. But the more Mahdiva's balance of power was tilting, the more Hurrem smiled. At the center of it all, because Hurrem didn't just understand as a slave. But here's what made Hurrem truly dangerous. She knew when to cry. She never acted like she'd won, when to disappear, she smiled humbly, and when to make a scene so perfectly timed as if she was still an outsider. Mahidevran tried to build. The moment she looked too powerful, wasn't weak. She would become a target. She was a lioness, so instead, she let love do the work for lions. When others schemed behind closed doors, one night, Hurrem used the most unpredictable force in the empire. The Sultan's heart. Hurrem. She wrote him letters, not just love notes, no maids, but essays on philosophy, no eyes, war, and justice. Physically, she quoted the Quran furiously. She questioned decisions, dragging her down by the hair. She offered better ones, scratching her face. Her mind became an extension of curses into the air. And Suleiman, and Hurrem, he wasn't just fight back. He was dependent. With fists. So when whispers rose, she let the enemies accused Hurrem of manipulating him, of corrupting the purity of the throne. And when he did, he defended her. He didn't rage openly. He didn't scream. Repeatedly. Silent. That had never happened before. When court members suggested exiling her back to the harem, Sultan Suleiman refused. The next day, Grand Vizier Ibrahim was summoned that Hurrem's influence was unhealthy. Once echoed her laughter, grew cold, now swallowed her footsteps in dread. Desperate and angry, she had struck the Sultan's favorite, literally attacked her and later marry. Suleiman banished her from the palace. That was unheard of. But for Hurrem, it wasn't enough. She didn't just want love. She wanted legacy. Because love fades. But children, they secure the future. So she gave the Sultan 5 children. 5. One of them, Selim, would eventually become Sultan himself, but that was still years away. For now, every child she bore was another anchor, not just out of Suleiman's heart, but as a declaration to Mahidevran's son. She wasn't going anywhere, Prince Mustafa. And with every son she bore for Suleiman, the darkest plots in Ottoman history. A game of succession so ruthless. Then another. It would leave a trail of blood from the palace, a nail in Mahidevran's coffin. And once again, by the time Mahidevran realized what was happening, it was too late. The most chilling part. Hurrem wasn't a passing flame. Didn't raise a sword. She was a storm. She didn't poison anyone. Storms don't ask for permission. Give orders. They destroy. She whispered. But Hurrem's power when she wasn't built on seduction. She loved. It was built on control. She played the part of a woman who loved, and so burned their pages that the most powerful man on earth began to see through her eyes. She didn't scream. What others called manipulation, she planned. Suleiman called truth. And when the moment came, what others feared as something unthinkable. He saw as clarity, marriage, and that is why concubine in Ottoman history, in the hands of a woman like her, become a legal wife, became the most dangerous weapon in the empire. She did, because unlike armies and politics, she rewrote centuries of tradition. Love couldn't be challenged and carved her name into the bones of an empire. It couldn't be stopped. The harem had many beautiful women, destroyed itself, but only one would walk out as a queen. And deep inside the palace, this was no ordinary feud. Velvet curtains, it didn't start with golden doors or slaps. That destruction had already begun. Love gave her power in the heart of the Topkapi Palace, and Hurrem Sultan stood at the center of one thing better than anyone in the Ottoman court. Power never lasts unless you eliminate the threat. Her first target was obvious, Mahidevran. Once the beloved mother of the Sultan's eldest son, Mahidevran had long ruled the harem with arrogance. She believed that bearing the firstborn son, Mustafa, guaranteed her place. That one day, when Suleiman died, her son would take the throne, and she would rule as the queen mother. But Hurrem wasn't interested in being second to anyone. At first, the war between them was quiet. A glance too long, a whispered insult, a gift intercepted. But Hurrem wasn't here to play games. She wanted Mahidevran gone. And so she laid a trap, not with violence, but with something far more powerful, pity. One day, after yet another confrontation, Hurrem appeared in front of the Sultan, her face bruised, eyes swollen, voice trembling. She didn't scream. She didn't beg. She simply stood there broken. And Suleiman, seeing the woman he loved hurt, snapped. The punishment was swift. Mahidevran was banished to the old palace in Bursa with her son Mustafa. It was exile disguised as honor. But Hurrem wasn't finished. Because her greatest threat wasn't Mahidevran. It was Mustafa. Strong, popular with the army, admired by the people. He was the perfect heir, and the one person standing between Hurrem's sons and the throne. She knew she couldn't touch him, not directly, but she didn't have to. Instead, she planted seeds, one whisper at a time. That Mustafa was too ambitious, that he listened to his own advisors too much, that maybe, just maybe, he wanted the throne before Suleiman died. And over time, the Sultan began to watch his son differently. But Hurrem's genius wasn't just in creating enemies. It was in turning friends into enemies. Her next move was against Valide Sultan, the Sultan's own mother. Valide was sharp, respected, and deeply suspicious of Hurrem from the very beginning. She saw what others refused to. That Hurrem wasn't just in
dost
love.
düşman
She was
bilsin
maneuvering.
görsün ki
So Hurrem
hünkârımız benim
smiled.
yanımda.
Vakti
She brought
gelenin
gifts,
canını alır,
praised her,
vakti
pretended to ask for
gelmeyenin de
guidance, all the while building her own
uykusundayken
network.
ruhlarını alır.
Within months, Valai's
Ölümüne
allies in the harem were
hükmettiği canı
gone,
alır,
reassigned,
ötekini
removed, or
muayyen bir
mysteriously
vakte kadar
disgraced.
bırakır.
When Valai
Şüphe
fell
yok
ill
ki
and eventually
bundan
died,
iyi düşün.
Hurrem didn't
Dün gece
celebrate.
hünkârımızın
She simply
yanındaydım
took her
Osman
seat.
Efendi.
And for the first
Eskisi
time in
gibi
Ottoman
uzun
history,
uzadıya sohbet
a
ettik.
former concubine became the most powerful woman in the empire.
Bir ara onu
No crown,
kaybettiğimi sanmıştım.
no sword, no
Biraz
army,
şu.
just strategy and
Zeynep
patience.
Hanım.
İyi
But the court
düşünecek
had
bir
one
kavim
final
için
line of defense.
ibretler
Ibrahim
vardır.
Pasha, the Grand Vizier, the Sultan's childhood friend. Hurrem knew she couldn't coexist with him because he
Resulullah
too saw
sallallahu
through
aleyhi ve
her.
sellem
And worse,
buyurdu
he
ki,
supported Mustafa. So she
kişi
waited,
uyandığı
and slowly
vakitte
she began to feed the
ruhumu bana
Sultan doubts about
gönderen,
his oldest friend.
beni uykumda
Letters,
öldürmeyen
rumors,
Rabbime
gold
hamdolsun.
that disappeared,
arama kimse
words that could be
giremez.
interpreted two ways.
Dostumuz,
Until one
kardeşliğimiz
night,
ebedidir.
Suleiman summoned his most loyal
Hünkârım,
servant and never let him
Zümer
leave.
suresi
Ibrahim Pasha was
42.
executed in
ayette
silence.
der ki,
No trial,
Allah
no outcry.
ölüm vakti
One by
gelenin
one, the rivals
yerleri ve
fell.
gökleri
Mahdiva,
kaymaktan
Mustafa,
tutan
Valai,
Allah'ıma
Ibrahim,
hamdolsun
and at
demeli.
the center of the storm stood Hurrem,
Gene Resulullah
smiling,
sallallahu aleyhi
alone.
ve
But the higher
selleme
she climbed,
sordular ki,
the more dangerous
cennet
the fall
ehli uyur
became.
mu?
Because now
Buyurdu ki,
there were no enemies
hayır.
left to fight. Only shadows
Uyku
and silence
ölümün kardeşi.
and guilt.
Hünkârım,
By
siz
now, Hurrem
uyuyacaksınız.
Sultan had conquered the harem.
Uyuyacaksınız.
Her rivals were gone.
Uyuyan bir
Her sons were
Ademoğlu
growing.
dünya
The place
işlerinden
beside the
elini
Sultan was
eteğini
untouchable.
çekmiştir.
But for Hurrem, that wasn't
Uyurken
enough.
olan
Because
biten
real power
hiçbir
didn't lie
şeyden
behind silk
mesul
curtains.
tutulamaz
It lay in the divan, the
ayıplanamaz
Sultan's council
ve
chamber.
itham
That's where
edilemez.
wars were declared.
Zira
Treaties signed,
cennette ölüm
governors
yoktur.
appointed. Until
Uyuduğunuz
now,
gibi
no woman had ever
ölürsünüz,
touched it. Hurrem was about to
uyandığınız
change
gibi
that. She began with
dirilirsiniz.
letters, long, detailed correspondences not just to Suleiman, but to foreign monarchs. Kings and queens across Europe received messages written by a woman,
Hünkârım,
something
bu
unheard of in
yüzden
diplomacy.
yüce
Some were shocked,
iradenizle
others were
kendinizden dahi
intrigued, but all
koruduğunuz
of them
bu
read her
zat
words
her
and
kimse
responded. One of her
ancak
closest allies was
siz
the King of Poland,
uyurken
her
infaz
homeland.
edilmeli.
She negotiated prisoner releases, trade deals, even military leniency, all while never leaving her chambers. Then came the
Zira
domestic moves.
hayat
She pushed Suleiman to
uyanıkken
appoint officials loyal to
hareketle
her,
oluşur.
not to old families or
Uyuyan
military
bir
elites,
kişi
governors,
gerçekte
judges,
yaşamaz.
ambassadors.
Böylece
Bit by bit,
hem
the empire's power structure
sadakatsizlığının
started to
cezasını
shift,
verirsiniz
not toward
hem
warlords or
de
generals, but toward Hurrem's network.
yemininizi
But the
bozmamış
most audacious
olursunuz
play,
hünkârım.
she commissioned buildings, mosques, bathhouses, schools, each one stamped with her name, not hidden behind her son's
Hünkârımız bunları
or her
okumuş
husband's, hers. This wasn't
Cenazelerde
vanity.
okumadıklarını
This was
söyledi.
legacy. Hurrem understood
Ama
something
Mehmet
every
Altan-
man in
İbrahim
that
Paşa
palace feared.
kendini bir
People
kartal
forget
zannediyor.
queens,
Beni de
but they
bir
remember
ver.
builders. And so,
Onun
brick
karşısında
by brick,
zayıf ve
she
çaresizmiş.
immortalized herself in stone.
Beni
But
parçalarla
power
yok edermiş.
attracts enemies like blood attracts wolves.
Madem ben
As her
bir
influence
güvercinim,
grew, so did
bu
the
vaziyette
whispers.
yapabileceğim
Some
tek bir şey
accused her of witchcraft, others of destroying the purity of the Ottoman line.
haber
Some
uçurma.
even said she bewitched the Sultan, that his mind had gone soft under her touch.
Belli ki
She
bu laflardan
smiled,
haberleri yok
because by the
sultanım.
time they whispered, it was
Ayaz
already
Paşa
too
iyi
late.
iş başardı.
Hurrem wasn't just inside the system.
Sana
She had
itimat
become it.
etmekle
And while others
yanılmamış.
saw her as a scandal, she saw herself as necessary.
Teveccühünüz sultanım.
Because in her mind, she wasn't just
Ne
securing
yapmam
power.
emredersiniz?
yazılanlar
She was
malumunuz
protecting her
olmuştur.
children. In a system
Mesele
that
nedir
devoured
paşa?
princes, she was building walls, made not of stone, but of
Okumanız
alliances,
icap eden bazı
influence,
hususlar var
and
hünkârım.
fear. But even the strongest walls cast shadows, and in those shadows, something was stirring, a reckoning, because no one holds an empire forever, not even Hurrem Sultan.
Yani
By the
elinde
time
olsa
Hurrem
bir kaşık
Sultan
suda
reached the height of her
boğacaksın
influence, she had everything a woman
Paşa
in the Ottoman
Hazretleri,
Empire could
bu
never dream
nasıl
of.
bir laftır?
She had broken every rule, bent every
Sen
tradition,
hünkârımıza yaranmak
stood
için
beside
aldın
a sultan,
karar.
not behind him. But
Senin
power,
yani
like
benim.
fire, doesn't warm
Bak,
forever.
ülke peşinde.
Sometimes it burns. The first
Yeah.
price she paid was loneliness. Once the harem buzzed with whispers behind her back. Now there was silence. Not out of respect,
Hünkârım.
but fear. No
Hayrola Ayaz
friends,
Paşa, yalnız mı geldin?
no equals.
Kadı
Only
efendi
servants
gelmedi
who
mi?
bowed, smiled, and
Ben başka bir
disappeared.
husus için
Her
rahatsız
love,
ettim sizi.
even that had changed.
Söyle.
Suleiman was still
Hünkârım,
devoted, but older.
Dün
Distant,
İbrahim Paşa'nın
weighed
Fransız
down by
elçisiyle
war,
olan
grief,
görüşmesinde
and
hazır
guilt.
bulunamadım.
Some say he no
sebeple
longer recognized the
müzakere
empire
zaptını
he
okudum.
once ruled,
Daha evvelki
because Hurrem had
müzakerelerin de
rewritten
zaptı
it.
geçti elim.
Then came the darkest blow.
Siz
The death of her
Şehzade
son,
Mustafa
Mehmet,
Hazretlerini
the
ziyaret
child she
ettiğiniz
raised,
vakit
protected, groomed
bir
for
müzakere
greatness,
yapılmış.
gone in an instant, and she couldn't stop
Haberim
it.
var. İbrahim
Not
Paşa
with
malumat
words,
vermişti.
not with influence, not with
O halde
power.
yazılanlar
Then
ma-
came the blood of Mustafa,
Paşa
her
Hazretleri,
greatest rival, her
benim
husband's
peşinde
eldest son.
olduğum tek
The
şey
execution of Mustafa,
adalettir.
likely influenced
Ben
by Hurrem's whispers,
hesabımı Allah-u
shattered the empire.
Teala'ya veririm.
The people wept. The
Mükafatımı
army
da
murmured of
Cenab-ı
betrayal.
Hak verecek.
And for the first time, the name
Adalet
Hurrem
mi?
was spoken with venom.
Peki bu
Some saw
yüzden mi
her as the
evladını
architect
köşe
of a
bucak
dynasty.
satarsın?
Others saw her
Bir
as its
başkasının
destroyer.
evladı
In
olsaydı.
her final
Ulan,
years, Hurrem was plagued by illness, her body weakening, her hair gray, her voice fading, but her mind still sharp, still watching, still calculating. She didn't live to see her son Selim take the throne. She died in 1558, 8 years before her husband. And when she did, the palace fell silent. No cheers, no mourning, just the echo of everything she had done and everything she had undone. Today, historians are still divided. Was she a visionary, a queen who rose from slavery to shape an empire? Or was she the serpent of the palace, whose ambition poisoned a generation? One thing is certain, no woman before or after would ever hold the kind of power she wielded. And even now, centuries later, her name still sparks awe and fear. Because Hurrem Sultan didn't just rewrite the rules. She made us all ask a terrifying question. If you could have everything, but lose everyone, was it worth it? She was never supposed to matter. Just a slave. Just another name lost in the shadows of the harem. But somehow, she became the voice of the Sultan's ear, the architect of an empire's future, and the ghost behind its darkest decisions. They called her dangerous, manipulative, cursed, but maybe that's what happens when a woman dares to unfold, when she refuses to accept the cage, when she rewrites the ending to a story already written for her. Hurrem Sultan didn't just rise to power, she tore power apart and rebuilt it in her image, and in doing so, she left us one haunting reminder: the most dangerous force in history was not a sword, not an army, not even a king. It was the woman no one saw coming. And now, Yuleni,